Let's get into it. Welcome to my presentation, Empowering Debt-Free High-Paying Futures, UX Design for Apprenticeship.gov. So over the summer, I had a chance to work on a lot of different projects and have a kind of big scope at the DOL, which I was really happy with. And today I'll be talking about 2 pages, Start an Apprenticeship in the Federal Government and Explore Federal Apprenticeships. Those 2 I created. And then our apprenticeship job search is something we have already that I was able to offer input on. So what is Apprenticeship.gov if you're not yet familiar? Apprenticeship.gov is a site run by the Office of Apprenticeship within the U.S. Department of Labor, and they serve employers, career seekers, and educators. And a registered apprenticeship, which they oversee, is one where you get paid on the job, you get credentials from the DOL at the end, and you get education during it, in classroom training, on the job training, and mentorship. So it's a really, really interesting program and kind of an alternative to college track. So what problem was I solving over the course of my fellowship? They have the Apprenticeship Hub initiative in the office, and it's an interagency project led by both the Office of Apprenticeship and the Office of Personnel Management, with the goal to expand registered apprenticeships as a workforce development solution within the federal government, and of course, promote those as well. So in my first week, I soaked up a lot of context, and that's really what I started with. I read through hundreds of pages of internal documents, listening sessions, web pages, and more to kind of start understanding the context of what problem I was solving, which led me to figure out the users for this project. And in a user-centered design process, we always call back to the core users we're designing for at every step of the design process. So I created 3 personas here, an HR representative in the federal service, a program manager in the federal service, and a career-seeking technician who's not in a registered apprenticeship yet, but is looking for one. And the pain points discovered from that initial kind of soaking up of context were that for career seekers, there's no centralized resource to find what apprenticeships the federal government offers for interested career seekers. And it's also difficult to use the apprenticeship job finder to find registered apprenticeships in the federal government. And for federal administrators, setting up a federal apprenticeship is a new and difficult process for many. And when going to apprenticeship.gov, federal agency staff find that many resources are for employers in the private sector, not necessarily for those in the federal government. And as a lot of you may know, the hiring process for the federal government is very different from the private sector. So that really needs to be custom. So what did we start with? I'll show what we had to begin with. The page we had to begin with was federal agency apprenticeship programs, and you'll be forgiven for not finding it in this mega menu because it's buried down here and it's under resources. We have career seekers, employers, educators, and then resources as the last tab. So this is what it looks like. We come in to a really big chunky paragraph using wording like workforce development, and other wording for federal staff members that might not make sense to career seekers. And then we're immediately directed off the page to go to YouTube. So that's taking us out of the website. We have a ton of real estate dedicated to these case studies, and only 2% of users clicked on this US map case study, and then no statistically significant amount clicked on any of the other case studies. So that's showing us that we're really not using our real estate well there. People skipped over that, and 18.5% clicked on these active programs. So we saw people came right through those to here, and this really interested people. And we also saw that 16% went back to career pages, showing us that they might not be quite interested in this page and it didn't have what they needed. And also the primary call to action is contact us, and it's buried all the way down here and kind of looks like the footer, which is another red flag. So I started by presenting a user flow where I split explore federal apprenticeships and start a federal apprenticeship into 2 different pages because we're designing for 2 very different users with very different user needs. And a very quick run through of my design process from there, once I got approval on that, was a planning phase, annotating what we had and really going into it, a sketching phase of ideas, and then a wireframing phase where I put this all into Figma and got it started. And then, of course, the final designs, which I'll show you all now. So this is the Start a Federal Apprenticeship page. Again, a resource for federal staff to start apprenticeships in the federal government. So we come into a really short and sweet intro this time with an added call to action, We have why registered apprenticeships. On the regular employers page, we have a top 6 call out for benefits of starting a registered apprenticeship. And here we're repeating that, but we're customizing it for federal staff, like recruiting young talent, retaining workers, customizing training for really technical technicians and welders and stuff like that. And yeah. Next, we have a step-by-step resource hub, and the centralized area will illuminate both the process of making a registered apprenticeship and give users helpful resources at each step. And then we also have to pitch a bit. We have to say, how does this differ from other employment options? HR professionals and federal staff are going to be choosing between a few different options when they're thinking about developing their workforce, like the Pathways program or just hiring full-time employees. So we kind of have to go into the differences between those programs and why registered apprenticeship might be a good fit for them. Next, we have frequently asked questions, and this really addresses a lot of those HR questions that we are running into in listening sessions. We want to address those doubts and common concerns. And finally, a final opportunity to contact. We heard over and over in listening sessions that once people got looped in to the OA, that they had a great time with it, and it was a much smoother process from there. But the initial startings where they weren't in contact with the OA, Office of Apprenticeship, were more difficult. So yeah, again, getting them in contact with that call to action. Then we have Explore Federal Apprenticeships for career seekers to see the benefits of working in the federal government. Again, a really short and sweet intro, and then notably a click off for the federal staff in case they got here via some SEO through Google or just clicked out of curiosity and got lost. We have why seek an apprenticeship with the federal government and some key points there. And then we have a centralized place for open roles within the federal government that'll take them to the apprenticeship job search with that filter pre-selected. And it's notable to say that we don't have a filter yet, so that was a recommendation I made later, which I'll talk about. And then we have all programs that will be shown in a database format where users can filter for roles, pay, duration, etc. And it allows them to see everything that's available if you're kind of exploring your career. Because up here, we might just see things posted in the last couple weeks or months. And here you can kind of really explore what all the options might be year round. And so I also touched the apprenticeship job search, which is a key component of the career seeker's user journey. And when I was going through, I noticed that finding an apprenticeship in the federal government on here was impossible. So again, very high impact, and it takes a specific focus with my users during this fellowship. So for reference, this is what we have right now on the site. So some direct user research I was able to do was I had a few career seekers in their early 20s familiar with job boards to do a couple tasks. I had them find an apprenticeship relevant to their chosen position posted in the last month, and then find a federal registered apprenticeship. I also asked them to speak out loud while going through here so we could kind of understand what they were thinking when they're using the tool. And 100% of the users failed to find an apprenticeship within a federal agency, which is a big red flag. And I collected some quantitative data afterwards as well through a survey, and they rated a 2 out of 5 ease of reading job descriptions, 2.3 out of 5 on usability, and 3.3 out of 5 on recentness of posting. So users weren't quite happy with it. And I pulled out some quotes from that as well while I was taking notes as they were talking. And on job descriptions, it's usually a big summary with no formatting that when it's scraped from the web, it loses a lot of the formatting. And they said, I don't want to read that. Rightfully so. And they said this should be organized by time. Sometimes postings from 9 months ago were considered most relevant and at the top of the page, while things from a week ago were buried. So we ran into a few different issues here that I highlighted. And to go through the redesign process, I did a heuristic evaluation, which I presented to my team. And that's an evaluation of a page or site based on 10 universally accepted user design principles. And I linked that out to a Nielsen article on it for my team, which are a lot of non-technical, non-user experience design staff, so they could read more about that. And here I said the heuristic, visibility of system status, and then I defined that. The design should always keep users informed about what's going on through appropriate feedback with a reasonable amount of time. And our issues here with that are that going between apprenticeship jobs and apprenticeship programs, you can't see what you're doing within the site. And I did a little video to demo that here. So when we click on apprenticeship programs, we're still seeing job descriptions down here, and it doesn't reset when we go between them. And when we reset the page, we're still seeing jobs and we're like, what's going on? Finally, when we hit search, it updates and we're seeing programs and we're seeing the filters for those. But when we go back again, it doesn't update. And when we do go to reset the page, it breaks. So the visibility of the system status and what we're looking at doesn't match up with what the user is doing. And I, of course, laid that out here as well for them to really pinpoint those. And then I provided them with a final design on how I thought we could really change that. I increased the contrast between the two a lot, and I took out apprenticeship in front of them because it was redundant. I made them lowercase for easier scannability, and I modernized the filters as well to be more consistent with what you might expect in a job finder. And then I suggested that between jobs and programs, the page fully resets, and that we really need to focus on making sure in the summaries down here of the job descriptions that all the formatting is kept when we scrape them from the web. So yeah, in conclusion, I'm really proud and happy of the scope of work I was able to do, offering as much UX feedback as I could in a short time, because those resources are really strained within the federal government. And I hope that this can be somewhat of a basis for future modernization. For Apprenticeship.gov, that's something they're working on now and just figuring out the beginning steps of. So I think showing that team UX process kind of really helps set that context. So yeah, this week I'll be handing off implementation, and the impact of this could impact 1.5 to 2 million users a year on the apprenticeship job search. And my personal takeaway is that I had an amazing time in this fellowship, and UX is definitely for me. So yeah, thank you all. I'm ready for your questions if you have any. Go ahead, Anna.
This is great work. Thanks for sharing it. And my question regards the typography that you had to deal with on the pages. So a lot of times when I'm working with interfaces in the federal government, the understanding of how to use typography to its fullest effect is relatively immature, I would say. So I was wondering if you had any conversations with your post office around how to best arrange the words on the page, in addition to creating those call to actions and in more visible places and things like that, or was typography not part of the conversation? Just wondering.
It definitely was, because right now, as they're kind of going into their modernization phases, the design system is coming up. So they put that out and asked for feedback on that. And I gave some feedback on that was around the use of all caps everywhere. There's a lot of use of all caps and buttons and everything, and it makes things very hard to scan. So I provided feedback there on that, and yeah, as much as I could in that respect. But yeah, I agree. Typography is a super important thing to think about when going for something like this. Any other questions, comments, things you might want to see more of?
How about if you were starting this over again today, what would you do differently to try to accomplish more?
I think I would have started the user interview process way, way, way earlier. I think even the full-time staff in the department, and yeah, who are there for much longer periods of time, struggle to get in contact with end users, especially at the federal government level. I noticed some of my co-fellows in more local settings were able to actually go straight to users and knew who they were talking to, but at the federal level, it's so broad and there's so many people and spread across the whole country that it's definitely a little harder. So I would have started that a lot earlier, just because, yeah, 10 weeks is a really short amount of time to try to get in contact with them all and figure out all your context of what questions you should even be asking. And yeah, so I ran into that challenge, and I would have definitely started that earlier if I could go back and do it again. Thank you so much for your comment, Remy. I appreciate that. In the chat, yeah, PowerPoint is a powerful thing. I've upped my PowerPoint skills over the last few months.
Thank you for this presentation. This is great. And I'm hoping that we can share more of this publicly as well. So I appreciate everyone being in this breakout. It looks like we're going to get kicked out in a hot second. So it's been great seeing you all here. And thanks, Charlie, for your presentation.